Good morning. It is a joy to be with you today. Welcome to those who are with us online. It is good to be in the family of God, as Sal led us to remember in his prayer. It is so good to be in the presence of God, as we have sung in many of our songs today, and I'm so happy to share in this time with you today. Well, I have two responses to your responses to the sermon last week. Number one, your level of concern and commiseration for my coffee maker crisis. Just heartwarming. It's how I know that you're a church family that cares, and I know that you've been worried about this all week long, so let me set your minds at ease. I've got a new coffee maker at home. It is pumping out great hot coffee every morning. All is well again in my morning routine. If only every problem disrupting our peace were so easy to resolve. Which brings us to the second thing. The subject of peace seems to have struck a chord with several of us. Colossians 3 said to us, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in the one body, and be thankful." And in various ways, I've been listening to you, as several of you have shared with me this week, your desire to find a deeper measure of that peace. The peace of Christ. And that doesn't really surprise me, because I found myself feeling that same thing as I spent time with this verse last week. But I've heard more than usual from a number of you saying, talking about that peace, wanting that peace. So let's not move on so quickly. Instead, I'd like to continue to think about the peace of Christ ruling in our hearts. Let's just do it from a different place in our Bibles. We're going to take a little break from Colossians today. We haven't done that since the start of the year. We've been hard at work in Colossians ever since 2022 began. But let's take a little bit of a break from Colossians today and turn somewhere else. I invite you to get out a Bible and turn to John chapter 11. Gospel of John chapter 11. As you do that, as you turn there, John 11, you're going to be turning to the story that we very often call the story of Lazarus. Some of you know it. I would like for us to think of this story today as the story of Martha. Martha's story. Martha is the sister of Lazarus, by the way, one of them. Verse 1 of the chapter says that a certain man was ill, Lazarus. Lazarus was from Bethany. It's a little village town just 2 miles away from Jerusalem, very close to Jerusalem. And Lazarus' two sisters were from there too. One of them was named Mary. The other one is named Martha. And it's Martha that I really want us to focus on today, because I was thinking about Martha as like one of the greatest examples I could think of in the Bible of someone who lives that Colossians 3:15 thing that we've been talking about. I have just incredible admiration for Martha and her faith in this story, and I could hardly find a better example of what it looks like to let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, like Martha does here. Even in the midst of one of the most peace-disrupting moments that you can imagine. In the middle of such a peace-disrupting moment, Martha, she doesn't have the cliche thing we think of when we think about peace. That's not really what we see. Instead, we see Martha make two choices. Two faith choices that I think you and I can learn from if we, like Martha, want our faith to stand strong in the midst of all the chaos in this world and the hard questions that we face in our faith. So I want to talk about those two choices that Martha makes today. But first, of course, we need to know what's going on. And it all starts, as we've seen, with Martha's brother Lazarus falling ill. So Martha and her sister Mary do exactly what you would expect them to do as people who are dear friends of Jesus and who are also believers in Jesus. They do exactly what we would expect. When Lazarus fell ill, verse 3, the sisters, Mary and Martha, sent a message to Jesus. They say, Lord, he whom you love is ill. Wouldn't you do the exact same thing? I mean, this is exactly what I would expect from someone who not only believes in Jesus, but is also a dear friend of Jesus, as we will find out as we continue to read this story. Jesus loves Lazarus, and he loves Martha, and he loves Mary. They have this close connection to one another. So, of course, they're going to call on their friend. Call on their friend, who, by the way, just happens to be just about the best possible friend you can have when your brother falls sick. The friend who opens the eyes of the blind. John chapter 9. The friend who was able to take someone who was paralyzed and give him mobility again. Paralyzed for 38 years. John chapter 5. In John chapter 4, Jesus just says a word, and this boy who's ill from far away, long distance, is healed at that very hour. And who wouldn't call on a friend like that in a situation like this? She does exactly what we'd expect. This is just exactly what I would expect to happen. Until we get to verse 4. Verse 4 says, but when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death, but rather it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, Jesus stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Which I gotta say is pretty much the exact opposite of what I expect Jesus to do in this situation. This is Jesus who has dropped everything, put his life on hold, and healed how many strangers? He learns that his friend is ill. It doesn't come right away. He stays in the place where he was 2 more days. Think this is what Martha had in mind? Definitely not. This is most definitely not what she expected. And at this point, it's very important to point out that Jesus doesn't have bad intentions here. This is not out of neglect or indifference or the fact that he doesn't care. No, Jesus has his reasons for delaying. It's 100% not those things. When Jesus finally does get to Bethany, later on in this chapter, we see him weeping with Mary, weeping with those who were mourning the loss of Lazarus. When we see his emotions pour out, we start to see that really deep down, maybe Jesus would have wanted nothing more than to drop everything and run and go to Lazarus and to Martha and to Mary. But he doesn't go. And he has his reasons for it. Do you think Martha knows his reasons for it? Jesus tells his disciples what he's going to do. Does Martha know? From Martha's point of view, all that she knows is that she's done exactly the thing you'd expect her to do. She called on Jesus, her dear friend, who she believes wholeheartedly is the Messiah. She called on him to come and save his brother. And she waited a day. She waited another. Jesus hasn't even left yet. Not even sure she knows that. She waits a little longer. Lazarus is getting worse. Jesus hasn't come yet. And Lazarus dies. And she waits another day and another day. and another day, and another day. And by the time Jesus finally arrives, Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 whole days. And Martha is the first one to see Jesus when he comes. He gets to Bethany. Martha's the first one to see him. What do you think are the first words out of Martha's mouth? First thing she says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. First thing Martha says. I think it speaks volumes too. It speaks to what, like, an immensely challenging thing this is that she's going through. How peace disrupting is this moment in her life, because it's not just the fact that her brother got sick and died, which is hard enough to deal with on its own. It's the fact that really deep down she believes that God could have been here to do something about this. She believes that in her heart. And yet what she sees happen, for reasons that she does not know, is that Jesus delays in coming and Lazarus dies. So now she's left to wrestle with all of that. Not just her grief, but the fact that, like, Lord, if you had been here. To me, this speaks volumes about how hard this moment is to keep faith. There's a reason that when Martha's sister Mary first sees Jesus, which didn't happen then, but a little later in the story, first words out of her mouth, very same thing, down to the word. Same things on her mind, too. Just speaks volumes about how this thing they're going through is so hard. But as loudly as this challenging moment rings through in the first words of Martha's meeting Jesus here, nothing speaks more loudly than what she says right after. It's here that Martha shows her incredible faith. It's here that Martha shows the first of her 2 choices that she makes in this passage that I think can really teach us a lot. Martha makes the choice right here and now that she's going to put her faith in something greater than what she can see. She's going to put her faith in something greater than what she can see. So listen to what she says next. Martha said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That's what she can see. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. And now she's moving beyond it, beyond what she can see. She's expressing her faith in God even now, she says. She's holding on to that faith in God's power that it might be greater than whatever it is that she sees all around her. Now, I don't even know exactly what she's thinking when she says that. I don't know what she's talking about there exactly, but what's clear is that she has a faith she's clinging to, holding on to, even now. And so Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha, like any good first century Jew, minus the Sadducees, says, look, I know that. I know that Jesus will rise, or that he, Lazarus, will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Jesus is asking her to put her faith in something that she cannot, has not seen. Even before Jesus goes and acts and shows her what he's going to do, nobody in the Gospel of John has been raised from the dead, not Jesus, not anybody. Martha's never seen anything like this. And yet, even though she cannot see it yet, Martha says, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world." Martha expresses her faith, her trust in the promise of Jesus, and it's faith in something that's more than the eye can see. And in the face of such a disruptive challenge, threatening her faith and her peace, Martha holds on to what she knows about Jesus. And this is what allows her to maintain her hope, her trust, her relationship with the one who is the resurrection and the life. Isn't that just incredible? You know this story, many of you. Martha is incredible, what she does right here. And it may not even be the most incredible thing that she does, which to me is in verse 38, if you're still following along in your Bible. It starts there. So this happens when Jesus is standing at the tomb of Lazarus. Seem to be a lot of other people there too. Mary's there. Martha's there too. And if you thought it was unexpected when Jesus delayed, when their friends said, "Come and help," well, then this just takes the cake. Verse 38, Jesus turns to somebody, doesn't say who, presumably Martha maybe, because Martha's the one who answers the question or answers what Jesus says. Jesus turns and says, "Take the stone away. Go ahead and move the stone away from the tomb where Lazarus is kept." What is Jesus doing here when he says this to Martha, to whomever is standing there? Take the stone away. What is he doing? Do you think maybe he's inviting Martha to take her faith one step further? So Martha has already spoken so powerfully about the faith she has in Jesus in spite of what she can see. But now Jesus is giving her a chance not just to say it, but to show it. To put her faith into action at this really difficult moment in her life, when push comes to shove. And at first, maybe Martha doesn't catch it. Martha says what anyone would say, "Lord, there's already a stench because he's been dead 4 days." Her response is, "What you're asking me to do is crazy. Who would do that?" But listen carefully to what Jesus says in response. He says, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" He's reminding her of that faith that she spoke about. Reminding her, saying, now is your chance to show it. Put it into action here. In the Gospel of John, the word faith only ever occurs as an action. It's always a verb. The word faith as a noun is all over our New Testament, 243 times, I think. We see it as a noun, but not one single time in the Gospel of John is it a noun. Every time, like over 80 times, we see the word faith. It's always a verb, because faith for John is something you show. It's something you put into action in your life. So Martha now makes her second remarkable choice. She obeys this word of Jesus despite how difficult it is. She puts her faith in action. She allows them to do exactly what Jesus said, and they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I've said this for the sake of the crowd standing here." Much like all of this is for the sake of the crowd standing here. so that they may believe that you sent me." And when he said this, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, his hands and his feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." And just as Jesus had promised, Martha and all of those with her can now see what they couldn't see before. Martha and all of those with her can now see the glory of God. And it's all because it all started when Martha maintained her faith when it was hard to see. And not only that, she showed her faith, put it into action when push came to shove. And to me, I think I can learn so much from Martha and her remarkable faith. Because in a time of great discomfort and confusion and hurt, Martha never lost sight of who she was putting her trust in. She never stopped listening and trying her best to live by what she heard. And isn't that what it means to let the peace of Christ rule over our hearts, rule over our worries and our fears and our frustrations? Not peace in some cliche way per se, but peace that rules over what we're going through, that sticks with us no matter what. And through these faithful choices that Martha makes, she is at last able to see the redemption of her hope, the validation of her trust. And the gospel says to us that we will too. We will see that too. In this life, like Martha, we may face unexpected trials. And even when we know, we believe in our hearts that God is able to work powerfully in them, and well, he may. But sometimes we have to deal with what Martha deals with. Question of why God delays. Why has he not acted in the way that I hoped that he would? In those times, I'm challenged by this story to learn from Martha, to hold on to faith in something greater than what my eye can see. For we walk by faith and not by sight. And I'm challenged to not only speak that faith, but put it into action. Put it into practice in my life. Showing my faith when push comes to shove, that's the goal. That's how Martha lives. And if we do that, we can have the peace that comes from knowing that no matter what we face here, one day we will see the glory of God. We will see what Martha sees. That Christ really is the resurrection and the life. Maybe you need that message today. Maybe it's something you need to hear. As you seek the peace of Christ in your life, could you be challenged today to put your trust in God? Put your trust in him even when it's hard to see what he's doing. Maybe you need to be challenged to just keep putting your faith into action in the way that one puts one foot in front of the other. Just keep going. Just keep trying. In that simple trust and obedience like Martha had. Maybe for someone you need to respond to the gospel today. When we are baptized into Christ, we experience a Lazarus-like moment where our life before our life of sin may end, but we have new life in Christ, raised up again. Raised up forever, like Christ was. For he is the resurrection and the life. However you may be called or challenged, let's respond to this message with our lives while we stand, while we sing.